Hi, I'm Dan Boyd.
And I'm Megan Gleason. It's day 59. 1 day left, almost 24 hours exactly.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Welcome to another episode of Rounding Up the Roundhouse. This will probably be the last episode before the session ends tomorrow at noon. So, yeah, a lot's been going on, and we're a little sleep deprived, but trying to keep up with all the latest.
Yeah, we're watching long floor sessions. The Senate is gone until about 1 a.m. Senate committees the last couple nights. The House went till 10:30 last night. We're expecting a long night tonight. This is the last full day to get things moving before the gavel hits tomorrow at noon.
Yeah, and let's jump right into the big action that we've been following. The legislature has signed off on the budget and the capital outlay bill. Both of those were unveiled this week, but then moved pretty quickly, and they're now headed to the governor's desk. She'll have until 20 days after the session ends to act on them. But another high-profile bill, a tax package that you've covered a fair amount, Megan, is still in limbo here. The House and Senate are kind of at a standstill about some different provisions in the bill, and they're trying to reach a compromise. They had a meeting of what's called the conference committee this morning, but didn't quite, reach a deal. So they're going to meet again later today, and we'll kind of see it. This is, a lot of different projects up in the air, and it could still all happen, or it could, totally fall apart and not pass. So, I think either options are viable, and it's some kind of late session drama on the tax package.
Yeah, and backing up a little bit on the tax package, so we saw it introduced last week on the House side, and it was a bit of a surprise. Senators said today they weren't really expecting a tax package this year, but it came through kind of late, and it introduced, it proposed eliminating personal income taxes for a lot of working families and working individuals. There's a certain breakdown of how much you make and how many kids you have, and your personal income taxes could be fully offset by that. And to pay for that, the package also proposed a new surtax on oil production, 0.28% on the sale and severance of oil. So this drew a lot of concern from Republicans and business leaders and oil industry leaders, but the House went ahead and passed the package through its chamber and sent it over to the Senate, and that left about $58 million or so for the Senate to write a check on and, do with what you want. And so the Senate proposed a bunch of tax credits, a bunch of tax breaks for foster parents, for healthcare practitioners, for even local journalism employers, volunteer first responders, that sort of thing. It added up to a little bit more, about $70 million. And I talked with Representative Lente this week, who kind of crafted the initial version of the package. And he said, yeah, we're probably going to have to come together and compromise and see if we can get under this $130 million cap, which is what the surtax on oil was expected to generate. But everybody was kind of thrown for a loop when the Senate met yesterday and just stripped out the oil surtax. It was super fast. There was almost no debate on it. And the tax package passed almost unanimously. It was not a surprise when the House came back later and they didn't agree with the changes. And that's what spurred this conference committee that you mentioned, Dan. The Senate refused to back down. And so now we're in this spot of we've got about $130 million tax credits and breaks to pay for in this tax package, but no funding mechanism in the tax package to pay for it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good summary, Megan. It's kind of a game of chicken a little bit at this point, seeing who will blink. Clearly there's pretty strong opposition to this new oil surtax from Republican legislators. But it was interesting that even in the Senate, the Democrats were in favor of removing that as well. I think it passed 36-1 after that amendment was made. So, this tax package does not have to pass. The budget is probably the essential thing that is needed to fund state services, and capital outlays. A lot of legislators view that as very important because it provides money for projects in their districts, parks and roads and water projects, things like that. This doesn't have to pass. But then again, I think a lot of people have invested a lot of time on it. And you mentioned some of the the tax credits and the different tax breaks in it. I think a lot of people are counting those. So certainly kind of high stakes, at this point. But without that kind of surtax to pay for it, the revenue hit would be about 130 million. And the fact that the budget is already on its way to the governor's desk, my understanding they would have to kind of take some drastic steps to try to get a new bill in place to give authorization to free up some reserves to pay for that if they're not able to come to an agreement about how to pay for the other tax provisions, either via the oil surtax or some other magic pot of money here at the Roundhouse.
Yeah, and they sort of mentioned this morning the possibility of looking at other bills that maybe money was set aside for backups and pulling money from there instead. And that, Representative Lente was really cautious about that. He said, I don't want House bills to just be stripped of funding to pay for this tax package. I don't think that's fair. Sacrificial lamb, I think you said earlier, was kind of the phrase this morning. So we'll see if they can come to an agreement. They're going to meet later this afternoon on that. And the Senate has said that they really don't want to back down on putting that oil surtax back in. They do not want to put it back in. And I've heard rumblings in the Roundhouse that one of the reasons is because the governor could just line item veto that anyway. She has the ability to go through this tax package and pick and choose what passes and what doesn't.
Yeah, so that's been the big kind of drama here at the Roundhouse is the tax package. Meanwhile, the governor has taken action on a few other bills that we've written about and talked about on the podcast. Yesterday, she signed but used her line item veto authority, which you just mentioned, on a different bill dealing with a game commission overhaul. Specifically, she took out a part that would make it harder to remove game commission members. That's been an issue in the past because she has removed some game commission members when she didn't like what they were doing on the commission. So advocates were still kind of trying to figure out next steps yesterday. They were, appreciative that the governor had signed the bulk of the bill into law. But it'll be interesting to see if there's a court challenge on that. Just this morning, we also got word the governor has signed the CYFD oversight bill. This is the Office of the Child Advocate bill. She signed that after getting some late amendments added to it on the Senate floor. But in her executive message, she made it clear that she's still unhappy with how the bill's kind of genesis, and saying she thinks it's kind of a political vendetta by legislators who are still mad about the special session last year. Also took some shots at Attorney General Raul Torres. So signed the bill, but had some pretty harsh words in doing so. So getting to that point in the session where I think people are getting a little tired, a little grumpy, and maybe kind of the gloves are coming off a little bit.
Yeah, we're really seeing tension in the political parties, not even across the aisle, but one political party and the other. And I know that the governor has, been kind of throwing shots at some of our Democrats. We've seen that last night. I saw a sort of tense scene on the Senate floor in the Republican Party, some rumors about, vote this way or that way. And people are tired. I mean, but at the same time, you don't want to wrap up early when you only have so much time. We're seeing debates go super long, a lot of stalling tactics to get this bill through and not that bill. And it is a very political point of the session.
And there are still, in addition to the tax package, there are still some high profile bills that in limbo that, kind of a matter of time, if they're brought up on the House or Senate floor. A couple that, I think we could mention would be a bill making it easier for independent voters to vote in primary elections. That's made it through the Senate and it passed the House Judiciary Committee, so it just needs to pass the House floor. There's also some medical compact bills that we've both been covering, but you kind of covered the latest developments. I think there's like at least 9 or 10 different compact bills, but at least a couple of those sound like they might have a chance of getting through here in the final hours of the session.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see all of them pass for sure. There's a lot of them out there still stuck in committee, but a few have made it to the floors, and a medical compact bill, which people argue is one of the most major ones. This is kind of a broader healthcare one. It passed the Senate Judiciary Committee recently, but the committee made some major changes to the bill, and the bill sponsors and the advocates say that those changes are actually going to deter the bill's purpose, which is to allow New Mexico to join an interstate medical compact. But leaders of that compact have sent an email to the bill sponsors saying, hey, these changes are too substantive. The other states didn't agree to this. And so if you try to get in our compact, we would have to reject you. So even if the bill does pass, its efficacy it's questionable at the end of the day.
And another bill I wanted to mention that actually was voted down early this morning after midnight on the Senate floor. And It had to do with juvenile crime. Obviously, it's become an intense and pretty emotional issue at the Roundhouse this session. Just this week, some pretty young juvenile offenders were arrested in connection with a hit and run murder of a bike rider in Albuquerque. And that's really, we've seen that brought up by several legislators in this debate. And this was a bill that would make some changes to kind of parole system and how judges handle kind of juvenile offenders. But I think it kind of got a little bit caught up in the heat of the moment. Republicans were opposed. They really said it didn't go far enough and wasn't, enough of a response. Some Democrats didn't like it because they thought, that it went too far and that it would. They really think that with these younger defendants that we need to focus on rehabilitation. And so in the end, the bill was voted down on a 13-24 vote. We haven't seen a lot of bills go down on 4 votes this session, but that was one that I think just I think the heat of the moment, I think the emotions attached to the issue, and maybe the timing for that bill wasn't right. But in the end, now it looks like juvenile crime. I suspect we'll hear more about that from Governor Lujan Grisham tomorrow after the session ends. But that's one area that the legislators haven't been able to come to an agreement on any legislation, and it doesn't look like anything on that subject will pass during this year's session.
Yeah, and I think it's reflective of that problem of trying to find a sweet spot. Like that's what we saw with this paid family medical leave act, where some people said it went too far and some people said it didn't go far enough, and it ultimately stalled because of that. So it's like a really, really sweet spot you have to hit. And, on the topic of passages yesterday, I was watching the House last night, and a measure to increase royalty rates for oil and gas land passed. And it's the first time it's passed the legislature. It's failed multiple times before. It would essentially raise the cap on royalty rates from 20% to 25% in the best spots to drill for oil and gas, which is the Permian Basin. I will note that that language is specified in the bill this year. It hadn't been specified in previous years, although that was still kind of the thinking of this is probably only going to be charged in the Permian because that's where the best of the best is. That's where we're competing with Texas for 25% royalty rates. But it's finally gotten through. The state land office has refused since last year to lease out those best tracts of oil and gas land until the legislature passed this. So it'll be interesting to see how that one does on the governor's desk. Her and Public Lands Commissioner Stephanie Garcia-Richard have been pretty hand in hand in a lot of renewable energy initiatives and aligned in their goals. So that was a pretty significant one that passed yesterday.
And I just had a great idea, Megan. I mean, maybe they could, the royalty rates, what do you think, use that to pay for the tax package? I mean, we maybe can do a little legislating here, help them out of the predicament.
Yeah, if any legislators watch this before 4 p.m., we might have a solution for you.
But no, on a serious note, there have been a lot of, successes, bills like that, advocates have pushed for years and haven't been able to get through. And some of them have got across the finish line. Others, you mentioned the paid family leave, it'll have to wait for another year. So I think that's kind of always the case at the Roundhouse, but we're still kind of be watching closely to see what does make it through this year and hoping to put together a roundup for this weekend, kind of letting everyone know what passed and what failed. I know it can be hard to track everything, especially in these final kind of frantic hours when a lot of bills can move really quickly. And, it can be hard even for us to kind of track what's happening and what passed and what failed. But we are trying to keep a close eye on all that and hopefully, give kind of final results to everyone once the dust settles.
And it can be hard to track it. I mean, online it can seem like something failed when it says the bill got stalled in committee, but actually it's in a tax package, like the quantum energy credits. We're trying to see those breaks come through in this tax package that's being worked out, although the bills didn't get through. So yeah, we'll try to have a roundup of everything. And I do want to mention one more bill in terms of something that's been introduced before in the past but hasn't quite made it, is a lobbying measure to require that lobbyists or their employers disclose what bills they're supporting or opposing. It's failed multiple times before. It got through kind of the sponsors were even surprised it got through this year. It was changed, and then the changes were stripped, and it came back to its original form, and now it's at the governor's desk, and it's drawn a lot of opposition from lobbyists, some of whom are willing to speak publicly about it, and others aren't, in fear of retribution that their bills are going to be killed. But advocates of it say, it's long overdue to have this kind of transparency measure and allow the public to know what's going on at the Roundhouse when it's, like we said, it's really hard to keep up with what's going on here, especially in these last few days when things change every single hour.
And ironically, I was thinking, you did a really good story on that lobbying bill, and now the lobbying efforts will start to whether the governor will sign it or not once the session ends. Obviously, the legislators will head home tomorrow at noon, but a lot of work will still continue. The governor's office will continue vetting bills that did pass over the next 20 days. She has until April 11th to work on them. So I think there will be some lobbying of the lobbyist bill and other bills as well. Advocates trying to make sure that their bills, are signed by the governor. We'll see. She has the 20 days typically on the budget and capital outlay. She uses most of that time period to really review the bills and before there's a decision announced. But we will probably be back with you with another podcast episode sometime during the bill signing period. But until then, I think we'll be, have our hands full trying to keep up with the latest developments at the Roundhouse. So we appreciate everybody listening to these episodes and following our work at abqjournal.com on social media and all of that. And we'll try to stay caffeinated and power through here the final 24 hours.
Yeah, especially keep an eye out in the Sunday paper. You're going to see all the follow-ups from the governors, from the Democrats, from the Republicans, how everybody felt about the session from us. But Dan and I are going to take some time off after this and breathe again. But we've really had a fun time doing this podcast, and we hope you guys liked it as well. We hope it was really informative.
And you can find the episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Am I missing any, Megan?
Yes, you got it. It only took how many episodes? 59 days, and you got the spiel.
Well, just like the legislators, I got to learn the script here sometimes. So we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll be back with you again sometime soon.
Thanks, everyone.